Evening, welcome to week 7 of PSHS 6240 here at George Washington University's School of Professional Studies Homeland Security. To start off with announcements, first, the WebEx session is this Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What I'm going to do, and as I mentioned last week, I'm going to talk, or Group 3 is going to do the Boston Marathon intelligence failure, and you're going to, go through some of the questions that were brought up in the previous lectures to discuss that. What we'll also do is a job talk. So 30 minutes or 20 to 30 minutes for the first section, and then 20 to 30 minutes for job talk. I ask that if you have questions, please send them to me beforehand about careers in the federal government, careers in the intelligence community, what have you. So please, I would recommend going through the whole thing, to being there at 9 p.m. Even if you're not briefing, just to see what Group 3 has, and so it can give you a better framework so what you're doing for the final paper. And I would also obviously go for the job talk as well. Paper 2, before I talk about Paper 2, I just want to hit on current events. Obviously, what's making the news of late is the protests that are really sweeping not just the United States but worldwide. And I don't want to get into too much detail about this. What I will do is I will send an article along with this YouTube video from The Economist that actually gives analytical points to how we can make police more effective and less violent, less escalatory, and more, I would argue, racially sensitive. There are points that, again, that are brought up in what you see in the news, and it's good that we're protesting and we're shining a light on injustices and even evidence of brutality going on. What we need to do as analysts and senior leaders is to see how we can translate that into actual effective policy recommendations going forward. And before we throw our hands up and say that it's all negative, the world, this is just the same old story, different day, I can have some sympathy with that argument, but I will also say is that it has gotten better. It has gotten better. I'm not going to say that there's not injustices out there, that there's not injustices in our criminal justice system, there's not problems with overzealous police, but because of protests in the past and because of events in the past and because of very enlightened individuals, systems have gotten better. So that's the one thing I just want to take away from this, and I'll send the Economist article along with this YouTube, and that's what I'll just say about the protests and the current events going forward. So paper 2, most of you have gotten it back. I think just some key points again need to be more specific. The science delineates the limitations of the WMD attack. There are constraints. You can't just ship chemical weapons overseas like you're shipping an Amazon package. It deteriorates, it degrades, that presents significant hurdles to attacking the homeland of the United States. You can't just launch a biological attack willy-nilly. There's incubation periods and RNATs and all the things that we're seeing with the coronavirus now that would impact the ability to launch actually successful bio attack. So you need to get down to the brass tacks. You got to talk, again, the impact of the science. How does it restrain it? How does it make it easier? You need to get down to, again, when I talk about chemical weapons, binary, unitary, precursor material. What's on the restricted list for the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons? Can you just buy this precursor stuff willy-nilly? For ricin, can you make it in Yemen? Can you ship it overseas? Can a decentralized, radicalized group use ricin in a mass casualty attack? That's kind of discussing the impact of science and the specificities there. And again, when I say think of the coronavirus, I use this example. You're in this position whoever you're briefing, a governor, a federal official, they're not going to be a epidemiologist. They're not going to understand extreme details. They'll look to someone like you and say, make this simple so I can talk to a mass public. And you'll see some of those public statements in the coronavirus. No one knew what social distancing was 6 months ago. No one knew what R0 was or incubation periods were. These are things that were explained to governors, really governors, in very, very simple terms so they can understand that. And breaking down these complexities to those simple so what factors is a key point in not just on this paper, but in your positions going forward. So moving on to week 6 review, just some questions. Are we more secure since 9/11? And this is something that you could bring up in your papers. This bleeds into what we talked about last week with the Brill article in the Atlantic and what we talked about in the 9/11 Commission going on. And I want you to ask that question, and you could actually make a paper out of that question if you want. I would argue, yes, we are more secure. The ability to do just like I said, it gets better. It's gotten better over years for criminal justice system. It's gotten better for our counterterrorism to be able to do to target these mass plots like at 9/11. Whether you say it's worth it or not, or it's worth the cost and money, the cost in civil liberties, that's certainly a debate. But I would argue that, yes, we are more secure. The ability for a terrorist group, a centralized one, to conduct a mass casualty attack like 9/11, I think has been degraded. So please argue with me or bring the opposition in a paper. This is an argument that you saw in National Geographic. What do you do if Bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S.? I think not. George Bush, the junior, gets a lot of criticism for this, that he didn't act on this. But let's say you're the intel analyst that briefed this, and he goes to you and he says, okay, what do you want me to do? What's your answer? And I bring this up because whether you're briefing the president, you're briefing a battalion commander, or you're a cybersecurity analyst briefing your business unit, you should be able to use the threat, if there's a threat out there, and bracket it with a recommendation. So if you're a cybersecurity analyst, very rarely are you going to say, sir, this is a threat, and we need to shut down our computer information systems for the next 4 weeks. If you say that, you better be sure that it is a very serious threat. If you say, sir, we have a threat of a cybersecurity and we need to update a patch on our various software, that at least brackets the problem so the leader that you're briefing, the decision maker, can say, okay, it's not a huge threat and the mitigation factors are pretty slim or pretty simple. Think of the coronavirus. We had reports of the coronavirus in December, January, and I've heard criticism for the president about this, but really in January, when you have these shadowy reports of a coronavirus in China, do you expect the president to say, okay, we're going to stop all businesses, close down all schools, and socially distance to stop that? That you have not given the decision maker, the policy maker, reasonable recommendations to implement. So that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across with that bullet. Was 9/11 intelligence failure? You can make the argument no, and I brought this up in the lecture. But as I mentioned, when I saw the Nova documentary, and I know that there was 2 known Al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States, known to our intelligence agencies, communicating with a known Bin Laden safe house, it'd be very difficult to classify 9/11 as anything but an intelligence failure. I would also argue, again, going back to bullet 2, perhaps our intelligence community should have known that a Tomahawk missile should have been used, or a passenger airplane should have been used as a Tomahawk missile, and the mitigation measures, reinforced doors, federal air marshals, hell, just putting the drink cart in front of the cockpit, which is what's done right now. If you ever fly in first class, you'll see that. That is something as simple as that would have made sure that the 9/11 plot would not have happened. Simple mitigation recommendations to prevent catastrophic risk. All right, so Fort Hood shooting. This is a key point, and I brought this up. Something to bring up if you're going to write a paper or brief on the Boston Marathon intelligence. What point should radicalization be monitored? I brought this up. Would it have made a difference? So Nidal Hassan is communicating with a known terrorist. Is that, well, let me back this up. Should I be monitored if I passively watch ISIS videos in my basement? Maybe, you can argue, but Anwar al-Awlaki has 150,000 followers on his YouTube videos. You can't follow all of them. What about if I take the next step and I like a Facebook page? Then should I be monitored? Maybe, but again, I'm still engaging in free speech. Plus, there's so many people, as I mentioned, Anwar al-Awlaki has so many likes, and ISIS, their various websites have so many likes that it would be very difficult. What if I interact the same way that Nidal Hassan did, where I'm actually communicating online, typing back and forth? Again, we're still talking in the thousands of people that do this. So it is, one, it's a free speech issue. I am allowed to watch whatever I want in the privacy of my home. And so that's the issue. And then the issue is just numbers. There's thousands of people who follow these websites. Let's change the dynamic either. Well, let's start with the right-wing extremists. You want to go the Daily Stormer, which is a right-wing neo-Nazi website. Look at the comment section. Not from a government computer. But look at the comment section. There's thousands of people that make comments against name your favorite ethnic group or minority group. And they're very violent comments. Do we monitor all of them? Do we track all of them? Should the government monitor all that? Very easy to say it if it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS, but when you talk about the right-wing extremist websites, then you get a little bit more gray area, or at least a perception of more of a gray area. So trying to answer that question, again, this is a potential paper to incorporate in your final paper. Do we have the appropriate funding structures, personnel to stop intelligence failures? If you're going to say we don't, you better have a very good justification, because we spend a lot of money since 9/11 compared to other countries on these things. So if you don't think we have the funding, say so. Or better have a good justification. Maybe the structures need to be different. If you're talking about reforming the intelligence community, changing different motivations, increasing integration between federal and local law enforcement, tell me where that change in structure would lead to more efficiencies. And then should we maybe just accept it? Especially when we're talking about lone wolves, whether it's right-wing extremism or Islamic extremism. If a guy in our culture, we want to have access to guns, we have an open country. If someone wants to buy a gun and open fire on a nightclub or another soft target, maybe we should just accept that. That's just the price of a free country. Can't stop them all. I'll let you decide. So week 7 preview. Again, we're going to look at leadership targeting. Is it a strategy? Is it a tactic? When does it work? When does it not work? And then we're going to look at the conditions that led to Islamic radicalism in the U.S. since 2009, and then start thinking about right-wing extremism. What conditions, again, since 2009, that we've seen this proliferation of right-wing extremism. I argue we haven't seen an increase in it. We've just seen it more revealed in the last few years. So I look forward to your questions and issues, and if you have any questions, please let me know.